Good morning, everybody. My name is Justin Voigt, and I'm the Events Manager here at Hawker Brownlow Education. I'd like to welcome you firstly to this webinar with Tina Boogren, Motivating and Inspiring Students. So thank you so much for your time this morning, everybody, and welcome to Tina. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Tina Boogren. As an educator, Tina was a finalist for the Colorado Teacher of the Year, and she received the Outstanding Teacher Award 7 years in a row. In addition to numerous articles, Tina is the author of In the First Few Years, Reflections of a Beginning Teacher. Tina has presented at the school, district, state and national level and has been featured speaker at the International Reading Association National Conference and Barnes & Noble Educators Nights. So without that, welcome Tina. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll hand it over to you now.
Perfect. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am thrilled that you all are here. Welcome. I am so thrilled that you all are here. Thank you for your patience. Before we do anything else, we're going to jump into the content, all that good stuff, I promise. But here's what I know. It's morning. We're getting started. I just want to start with a question to kind of bring us into this moment. In fact, I'm going to play a little music, and what I invite you to do is over in that chat box, responding to all panelists and attendees, will you please answer this question that's on the screen? What is saving your life right now? Go ahead and just drop your response in that chat box. That'll help us get used to that. And I'm going to get a little music going, I believe. Nice, you guys. Thank you. So I'm going to invite you to keep adding to the chat box over there. Like, love adding your comments over here. Oh, they make me so happy. And hold that thought, because in just a second, I'm going to explain to you why I had to do that. But in the meantime, feel free to keep adding all that goodness over there. So I'm going to formally welcome you. This session is on motivating and inspiring students, and I can't think of a more interesting and important time than the time that we're currently in right now to be thinking about this topic. So before we go on and do anything else, please hear me say thank you. I know everything is so hard, right? The world is hard and school is hard right now. And we wake up every morning, that feeling of before we turn on the news, like, what is happening today? What is going on today? What is our life going to look like? And let me just say thank you for being so awesome. As educators, you're on the front lines. And I just want to say thank you for the work that you continue to do in spite of all of the hardships. So thank you for being so awesome. I am Tina Boogren, and I'm coming to you from Denver, Colorado. So welcome to my home. I so wish that I was there in person with all of you. It will happen one of these days. But in the meantime, I'm grateful for this opportunity to visit with you this way. So you see on the screen there, that's a picture of the airport, because typically I fly to do all of these workshops, but I have been home since March. So I'm learning how to do this Zoom thing like everyone else. And it's working pretty well. So my educational background, I was a teacher for a long time. I was an English teacher, middle school and high school level mainly. I was also an instructional coach, a site level administrator. And then I have been doing this job now where I get to travel and train and work with educators all over the world with Solution Tree and Marzana Resources for about 10 years now. And the topic that I'm going to speak with you you today about is I have such passion, and it goes hand in hand. If any of you had joined me for my previous session where I talked about self-care for educators, this is the other side of that. I believe these two topics go hand in hand. That first, we really need to take care of ourselves. I'm going to remind you of that as we go through our session today in order to talk about how we're able to best support our students. So our structure, as I said, this is going to be interactive. I know typically when we hear webinar, our brain thinks, okay, I'm just going to sit back and I'm going to be listening the whole time. But what happens is we miss so much. Justin and I were just chatting before how many webinars each of us have sat in on. They're just really difficult for engagement. So I'm going to do a few things to help us. I'm going to make sure that this is interactive. And the easiest way to do this is like we've been doing over here in that chat box. Here's the deal. I'm going to give you information, but man, you all have the expertise, and to be able to share with each other is going to make this even more robust, and you will walk away with even more strategies that you can use right away. So we will be doing that. Also, keep your own energy level up. I know it's morning there. It's hard to get started. If you need to stand up, if you need to take your device and go sit where you've got some sunshine coming in, whatever you need to do that. And then I'm going to invite you to give yourself permission to do one very simple thing. And that is, for our time together, I invite you to go all in, meaning give yourself the gift of really being fully present for this hour. Which means if you need to turn your phone upside down, if you need to put a screen in front of a child for a little while longer, if you need to shut the door, whatever you need to do to give yourself over to this, you will gain so much by doing that. So thank you. Okay, what I want us to do then is go back. If you haven't had a chance, we might not need a full 45 seconds, but I want you to think through exactly what are those comments that remind you of why you got into this profession in the first place. What are those, man, when you hear a student say this piece or this sentence, what are those best comments? What is it that makes you keep doing this job? Because we know how hard this job is, and it's just getting harder and harder. But if we can tap into this, I would argue that these comments are the why. I would love if you would either in that chat box, do it in the chat box if you would. What are those great comments? Don't be shy. What are the things that resonate from you that mean the most when you hear students say them? Oh, you guys keep those coming. Oh, those make me so happy to read. Yes, thank you. Yes, I love them. Okay, so I asked you two specific questions to get us started. The very first question that I asked you to respond to was, what is saving your life right now? And then this question on the best comments that you've heard from students. And I said I was going to explain to you exactly why I posed those questions. So let me do that right now. What we know without a doubt is this. I'm going to let you read that on the screen. So here's the deal. By asking you 2 questions to nudge your thinking to think of positive things, we did a couple of things. Number 1, man, it just helps put us in a good mood. And what a better way to start the day than getting those positive emotions going. The most important piece of this, though, is that we actually maybe put your brain in a slightly different place. What's so powerful about this research is the notion that when we have those positive thoughts, it actually helps our thinking become more creative, flexible, integrative, and inclusive. And I can't think of a more important time than this unique time that we are in right now, where we need creative and flexible thinking as things are changing so much. So I think that's such a great takeaway. Think of the impact of this not only on your own life, but for your students. If we make sure that our interactions, our initial interactions with students at the start of the day or the start of the class, let's start with the positive. That's not just fluff, that there's this incredible research behind this is huge. The other thing to consider when you think about, especially with students, is the notion that when we get enough people together with those positive emotions, it is contagious. So I'll let you read that. So we know emotions, good or bad, are contagious. Right now, collectively in the world, anxiety and fear is very contagious right now. That's spreading like wildfire. But if we can remember, we can also spread the positive emotions, how powerful that is. We know that feeling when we get a group of positive people together and it just explodes. That's what we're going for. Everything's hard right now. Everything's really hard right now. And it's so easy to slip into the negative. That's a very natural place to be. But if we can purposely override that and focus on the positive, oh, that impact is huge. So think through those ways that we can really help start our day personally, with our families, with our colleagues, and with our students to get our brain in that positive space. Oh, that just helps set up our thinking for the rest of the day. So thank you for sharing those. All right, so here's what we know for sure. I don't think anyone is surprised by the statement that's on the screen there. It's just our foundation to come back to again and again and again. You know, in those of you that have been teaching for a while, we kind of tend to swing a few different ways on the pendulum. So I would say years ago, we were really focused on relationships with students. And then there was kind of this shift of accountability, and we swung really far the other way. And now I think the good news is, in a general sense, we're back in the middle part where we know we absolutely need both. We need the content, and the only way students are going to learn that content is if they feel safe and supported. And I would also add to this that we need the adults in the building to feel safe and supported as well. So the foundation that we utilize for this is going to be familiar to you. It is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we've learned this in a psychology class, most likely along the way. This is background knowledge. Let's bring it to the forefront of our mind. And the reason that we utilize this as the basis of talking about social emotional learning for students is because we are familiar with this. And this is true not only for students, but for ourselves. So if you were able to join me for the self-care webinar, I used the same hierarchy of goals here, because we know that if we think of this pyramid of have 2 sides of this pyramid, one side, what we're going to talk about tonight is this morning, is how we meet the needs of our students at these various levels. And as we go through this, we need to think of the pyramid's other side of how we can help stabilize each of these levels for ourselves, the adults in the building too, to provide this support. Now, what we did is we took the levels and we just attached a question to each of those. So if you want to screenshot this, you are welcome to take a photo of this. What we're doing here by making each of these levels questions is, here's how we want you to think of these. At any given moment, a student is going through these questions in their mind. Metaphorically, they don't even realize they're doing it, but their brain just kind of does this. And the minute that they find themselves at a question that they cannot answer positively to, they will get stuck at that level. And the hard part is you all know very well, When students are stuck and they have a level or multiple levels that are not being met, we are going to see that in their behavior. And the hard part is their behavior is different. Not everyone acts the same way. So some kids will act out, some will shut down, some will turn into the class clown. The biggest takeaway that I want us to remember here is that a student's misbehavior is never personal. Ooh, I know that's a hard one because it feels very personal, but I'm going to say that again. A student's misbehavior is never personal. That in reality, their misbehavior is actually them signaling to us that they have some needs that are not being met. And the lower on the pyramid that those missing needs are, the more dramatic the behavior typically. So again, it just helps create a different lens for looking at students. When we see them acting out in certain ways, that's a signal to us to dig a little bit deeper and see if we can determine which level or levels does the student need some support with. And then what we're going to talk about tonight are strategies that we can attach to each of these levels. As a side note, again, these levels are also true for us as the adults in the building. So let's start with just a few kind of reminders here. I'm going to put 2 bullet points on the screen and let you read those. One of the things that we have been noticing, particularly here in the United States, as we are in summer, starting to begin a brand new school year, there is such a fear of how much students have missed, the gaps that they have in their knowledge, but the fear is that we are going to jump into too much content, too fast, too worried, too stressed, that if we don't take time to really go back and make sure that students feel safe and that their physiological needs are met and they have that sense of belonging, they will never get to the knowledge part. So we really need to hold on to each of the levels of the pyramid, particularly those first 4 levels. Okay. So we're going to start out and I'm going to give you at least one strategy for each of the levels to consider. So thinking now, put our educator hat back on, we're thinking about our students, we're thinking about level 1, our physiological needs. So physiological needs, there's obviously a lot here. This is diet, sleep, and exercise are the big ones. And it's hard because many of those areas are outside of our control, right? We don't really have a lot of control over sleep for students. But we can help them get more sleep. We can help them understand that they need to eat healthier foods and they need to put the hot Cheetos away and maybe pick up some water, right? That those things all absolutely impact learning. The one area that I want to highlight for our physiological needs for tonight is the notion of physical movement, how important it is for students to be able to move. And we know in various different learning environments, so whether we are in person, I know some of you have moved back to virtual, I know there's a variety of blended learning, the importance of physical movement, no matter what situation we're in, is huge. Here's what the research says. I'm going to let you read this on the screen here, if it comes up. Oops, let me go back one. I think it missed. There we go. So this is powerful. The part of the brain that processes movement is the same part of the brain that processes learning. That is huge. I always say, think about, gosh, if we didn't clearly always know this, because typically what happens oftentimes in schools is that the students that need the most learning, typically, right, the first thing we take away from them is movement. We oftentimes take away recess. We pull them out of a physical education class. We put them in a double block schedule where, yes, they get more time with the content they need, but they have less opportunities to move. So we just want to rethink this and keep this in the forefront of our mind. We know when we move, look what happens to our brain. Just a little bit of movement fires up more pieces of our brain. So this is absolutely attached to student achievement. So John Rady is the author of the book Spark. This book is a few years old now, but it is fantastic. I'm going to let you read this quote from him. what I love about this is that, it's physical movement for our body, yes, but it's actually for our brain. So here's what I'd like us to do. I'm going to put a timer on once again, and I'd love for us to share in that chat box what are some brain break activities that can be utilized no matter what your setting currently is or could turn into as the weeks go on. Like, what are things that you can do to get your students up and moving, whatever age range that you teach. So even simple things like having students stand up and do jumping jacks, having students just stand up and do a big stretch always feels good. So I'd love for you to share, what are those brain break activities that you utilize that work for you? Nice. Oh my gosh, I love these ideas. So as you're reading each other's comments, make sure to jot down any new ideas that you want to hold on to. Absolutely. And a couple of you mentioned, yes, it's hard to remember, particularly if you are in a virtual setting. It's hard because a body that's sitting, it's hard with the computer. Here's a general rule of thumb on the virtual piece. We really need to get up and move about every 20 minutes. And I love the idea of literally setting a timer to remind us to do that. Yes. And some of you mentioned that there's activities that we can do that are just part of a lesson that students don't even realize that they're kind of moving. Sometimes, yes, we can relate it to songs. You got it. So think about, we just sometimes forget the importance of physical movement attached to our physiological needs. So hopefully you got some new ideas there. And then we're going to move up to the next level, which is safety. And safety is clearly on the forefront of our minds right now, without a doubt. So something to consider is this notion that, yep, many of you can probably already attest to this. Safety has been rocked for all of us, adults and students, all of us. When we think about safety, in order to feel safe, we need order, we need fairness, and we need predictability. Let me say those three again. In order to feel safe, we need order and fairness and predictability. And in the middle of this pandemic, all three of those areas have kind of blown up, right? We're trying to make things as normal and get order as much as possible, but we don't really know what next week is going to look like. We don't even half the time know what tomorrow is going to look like. That predictability is so unpredictable, and fairness, oh my goodness. So every single one of us could list all the ways that things are not fair, all the canceled events and vacations and ceremonies and celebrations, and just so much of this. Collectively, all of us have been impacted, which as a result of that, clearly we are going to see and continue to see some manifestation of this in our classrooms, without a doubt. So we know that we really want to put that safety piece absolutely first. So when we think about Every single day, part of our planning is how do we ensure safety, safety, safety. I know you're already doing this, just kind of some reminders here. Every opportunity that we have where we interact with students, where we interact with the community, with staff, with the parents, is all about how do we make people feel safe. We may not have all of the answers, of course we don't, but if we let folks know through that communication and saying that this is our commitment, that we are ensuring that everyone is safe, that is the number one piece to remember right now. So before we get to the chat box, let me explain what I mean by these two questions here. When we consider safety, safety is interesting in our brains because our brains cannot tell the difference between actual safety and the perception of safety. So, here's a perfect example. When sometimes when I visit schools, there's a metal detector for me to enter. So that metal detector is in place to increase the actual safety. But in reality, what it does is it has an impact on our brain, and it says to us, my brain always says, oh, this isn't a safe place. That's the first reaction that I get. So my question is, what are some things that you are doing either in your classroom or in your school together? How are you ensuring that students are safe during this unique time? And also, how are you ensuring that students actually feel safe? Oh, thank you for those. See that balance there, which is so interesting, right? All the things that we do to increase safety, just even thinking about masks. When we first started wearing masks, that was clearly it's to increase our actual safety. I hated it. I had a very visceral reaction the first time that I was at the grocery store with the masks. It made me not feel safe, although that was there to increase our safety. So yes, we're as we live through this, and we're all at kind of different stages here. I know some of you are in school and some of you are out of school, and it's all around the safety piece. What we need to do to keep everyone safe is huge. What's really important to me and what I love, you guys, that you listed over here are also not only the things to help students be actually safe, but how do we help them feel safe? And that gets back to those, oh man, the connections and the relationships and the constant check-ins and just making sure that we have the consistent message. And I love these. These are so powerful. Yes. A strategy that you might consider is this idea here of identifying what do students need to feel safe. We sometimes forget to ask. I think this is so powerful. This is something that I invite you to do on your own when you've got a little bit of time as well. Just do a little bit of journaling or think through, just put this sentence stem at the top of a paper. I feel safe when. Set a timer and just list as many things as you can. And then ask yourself, how are you committing to honoring what you need to feel safe? I'll give you some examples. So I feel safe when I strike a balance between knowing what's happening in the world and also turning the news off. So I have to be really careful about my consumption of the news. And then when I know that I'm done, I feel safe when I feel like I'm in control of things. And what I need to feel in control, I need a routine. I need some habits. So identifying that for ourselves, this helps us get ahead of the anxiety that is caused when we don't feel safe. This is also so powerful to do with your family, to do with your staff, to do with colleagues, to do with students. If we just ask, what is it that you need to feel safe? In fact, I'm going to just share with you, I've done this a number of times in different workshops. Let me share some people's responses to get your thinking going here. You'll just see them come up on the screen. Okay, so that gives you a few ideas there. So that might be something to jot down that you might consider doing either for yourself, for your students, just thinking through what is it that we need to feel safe and just asking. And then I want to give you one other tip and strategy for level 2 to utilize with students of what happens when, okay, we can't get ahead of it, we're in it, when we don't feel safe in the moment, when that anxiety has crept up, and that's a really common thing to be happening right now. It's one of my favorite strategies. It's called Take 5. And this is something that you do in any given moment when you just feel that anxiety, which, by the way, anxiety can be thought of as, we don't feel safe because we are thinking about the future, a future we don't have control over. So for safety, what we really want to do, our desired outcome, is to be able to get out of that future space, put ourselves back in this present moment, and help our body to recognize that in this exact moment, we are safe. In this exact moment, we are safe. And that calms our nervous system down again, and just puts us again back in the present moment. So this idea of Take 5, what you do is you literally just pause. This all happens in your brain. You don't have to write anything down. You don't have to say it out loud. It's just a very concrete strategy you can utilize. So you just pause and you identify, what are 5 things that I can see right now in this moment? What are 4 things I can hear? 3 things I can actually feel or touch? 2 things I can smell, and 1 thing I can taste. And if you do this over and over again, as many times as you need to, again, you're going to get your nervous system to calm down and remind you that you are safe in this moment. This is such a great thing for students to do. When students get really anxious or worked up, or you see it in their behavior. If you can give them this tool to have, this is such a powerful tool. This is often a tool given to people to hold on to when they feel a panic attack coming on. It just helps get them back in the present moment. So in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a timer on. I'm not going to play any music, and I want you just to do this. So you might not be feeling anxious right now, so it won't be quite as powerful, but I want you to practice doing this to build a little muscle memory around this so that you have this strategy for yourself and then can turn around and give it to students as well. So I'll leave this screen up, and I want you to just go through this in your mind. I'm going to give you a minute. Go ahead. Nice. I'm going to pause you right there. Thank you. I love those of you typing it in here too. And you could hear me typing. I apologize. I had computer issues there. So I hope that you found that to be a real grounding piece. Again, it's hard when you're not feeling anxious in the moment, but to have that to hold on to and to teach that to students, that's powerful. Good. Thank you, guys. So we have been together for a little while, and as we just said, we need to take these brain breaks. So I'm going to put 30 seconds on the clock here, and I'm going to invite you exactly where you are right now. Just stand up, stretch, move your body, come back to me in 30 seconds. Perfect. Thank you. Good. Ooh, Someone's eating toast right now, and the smell of toast is like one of the greatest smells in the world, I feel like. Yes, good. Okay. So if you've got a few ideas, we've talked about physiology, talked about safety, let's move up to belonging. So belonging, of course, so important. We are hardwired for human connection. And again, the pandemic has put a little damper on belonging in some ways. So, we talk about social distancing. Someone gave me the terminology of physical distancing. We want to stay socially connected, but we might have to have some physical distance. So the idea of belonging is huge. So this really taps into relationships. And we know relationships are the core essential piece of learning, actually, that without those strong relationships, if a student doesn't feel safe, if they don't have that sense of belonging, that learning, once again, isn't going to happen. So we know that we want to be able to gather that information about students to get to know them. And there's lots of ways that we can do this, right? So I have a few ideas up here on the screen. The first one we're actually going to talk about, student inventories. And the reason I bring this one up is because typically, most of us, myself included, we're really good at doing this at the start of the school year, but you all are in the middle of your school year, and this is so important to still do now, right? To still be able to continually get to know students, so asking them questions. And I know it's going to vary on the age level that you teach. For some, you're going to be having an oral conversation. For some, you'll be talking to parents and guardians. For some, you might have students respond, but just asking them questions, getting to know them, helping a student feel important and feel like they have a real place in the school and in the classroom is essential. So there's so many wonderful questions that we can utilize that students love to respond to. One engagement strategy that's built around research is when we allow opportunities for students to talk about themselves. They all love to talk about themselves, particularly younger ages. Absolutely, will always want to volunteer. So asking questions like these, again, you're welcome to take a screenshot of this if this is something you want to hold on to, tweak this in different ways. And the nice part is if we can get questions that we have on hand, we can utilize these at different times. These can be warm-ups, right? Remember when we shared how important it is to start the day with the positive information? So asking a question that elicits a positive response, having a get to know you question at the bottom of an assignment, not for a grade, but just to check in, using a personal question as an exit ticket, communicating if you've got journaling activities that you do in your classroom, just having these questions on hand is huge. Which means I want us to do a little bit of kind of crowdsourcing to create even more questions. So I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock, and hopefully the computer will participate this time, but I would love, let's get a bank of questions going over in that chat box. What are questions that you either already utilize or could utilize that you can use any time of year just as a way to continually get to know your students? And again, I'll invite you to add your questions to that chat box and then be reading each other's. And as you read some that you think, oh, that's such a juicy question, I want to make sure I have that, jot that down so that you have it to hold on to. I love these. These are fantastic, you guys. Yes. So I'm going to put a few more on the screen as well. Coming right up here. Oh, shoot. There we go. It should come back. So screenshot again. Jot any of these down from the chat box that you want to hold on to. I love these. And what I hope is that if you've got this kind of database that you can just pick and choose from, then you don't have to think of them off the top of your head. I love these. So powerful. Even thinking about, so those of you, the virtual considerations, ways that we can still continue to build those relationships and get to know each other as well. Some of you already mentioned these, having the personal videos, using a Google form to kind of check in, ask some personal questions, setting up a Padlet site where you can kind of post what you're doing and share with each other, that no matter what our environment is, that sense of belonging is huge. So thank you. Good. So again, stretch 15 seconds. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So we get to move up to level 4. Now we're talking about esteem. So when we think about esteem, this is a hard one. I show this slide always because what's fascinating to me is oftentimes students that have certain behavior, it almost feels like they have an excessively high esteem, but in reality, that's a signal of having low esteem. And that low esteem could come from a variety of things. It could be the subject area itself. It could be a relationship factor that they have to, that there's a struggle with a relationship. So many things impact our esteem. So I think that's just interesting. Again, if you see some of this behavior, that will be a signal to you that esteem is the area where they need some support. So there's ways that we can really help to boost that sense of competence, right? That sense of growth. When we know that students feel that they can do it, right? The answer to the question of, can I do this? If they can answer that positively, that sense of efficacy, that's what we're looking for to really help with that esteem. There's different ways that we can bring esteem into the classroom. One of the things we always say is that emphasis on growth. That, we have the achievement in our classroom, but if we can not wait until the achievement piece, that if we can emphasize the growth along the way, that helps boost esteem. So if you utilize any sort of proficiency scale, I'm going to show you an example of a very simple one to get started. Anytime that you have the pretest and you're checking in and those formative assessment pieces, that's an opportunity to celebrate the growth, and all of that celebration is tapping into esteem, which is huge. So even if you utilize a very simple, just generic starting place scale like this, if students know what the learning goal is and they can say where they currently are, and if we check in at different points and they find that they are moving up in their numbers here, that's a cause for celebration, and that's a real esteem boost, which is huge, huge. Okay. Good, so I'm going to keep us moving here for the sake of time, and I want to move then to the top of the pyramid, which is self-actualization. So something that I want to make really clear, the first 4 levels of the hierarchy here are all about avoiding negative physical or physiological sensations. And that's about attention and engagement, right? And some of those first 2 levels, right? If students don't have their physiological and safety needs met, they cannot even pay attention. We can attach then the first 2 levels to attention. Levels 3 and 4, belonging and esteem, are really attached to engagement. And then finally, we're getting to that motivation and inspiration. That's the top of the pyramid. And the hard part is we want for students to feel motivated and inspired. That's our goal. But it's really hard to get to these top levels if the bottom 4 levels aren't solid. So that's why we need the full piece here. But when we get to self-actualization, so one of the things that we know is at this top level, that sense of self-actualization, those who are self-actualized, they have this specific mental disposition. they are able to stay focused even when the answers are not immediately apparent. This is such a fascinating thing to think about in the year 2020, because we know if we have a problem, we immediately ask Siri or Alexa or our phone, right? And we get answers right away. But someone who's self-actualized is someone who is able to stick with something. It's that kind of grit and perseverance that we hear so much about. So as we think about students in the classroom, how can we have them practice that mental disposition of staying focused? And one of our favorite ways to do this is through problems of unusual thinking. I'm going to actually do 2 of them with you. So very quick, I'm not going to give you enough time for this, but I want you to just play with it. So if you've got some scratch paper, I want you to just put those 9 dots on your scratch paper. And your challenge is to try to connect all of the dots using 4 straight lines without lifting your pencil. Try to connect all of the dots with 4 straight lines without lifting your pencil. I'm going to give you 45 seconds. You probably will need a little bit more time. I will give you the answer, but just try. And again, as you're doing this, let me remind you, you are practicing that mental disposition of not giving up. So if you try it and you don't get it right, keep going. And that's what we want to do with our students. We want them to keep trying, stick with it. And if we can do it with these types of fun problems of unusual thinking that's not attached to a grade, that it's just for fun, this is a great way to practice that mental disposition that we really want students to have. So keep going. I wish there was a way to kind of show this in the chat box, and there's not. So you're just going to get to play with it. And I know it's not enough time, but I'm going to give you the answer so that you have this. So first, I think the easiest way to find this is first find those 9 dots. And then you can see I put arrows on there so you can kind of trace this. The clue I always give is to think outside the box. Again, take a screenshot of this if you want to have it. And let me give you another one just because these are so fun. So again, stick with this one. So this one, again, I'm going to get that timer going. So this one, all I want you to do is figure out, tell me what parking space this car is in. In fact, when you think you figured it out, you can go ahead and put it in the chat box. I won't tell you if you're right or wrong yet. Just put your best guess in the chat box when you think you've got it. Nice. Ta-da, look at Sue and Jason. You are the winners. Absolutely. It is 87. So let me put it back. This is one of those, if you didn't get it, it's just, oh, it's so frustrating. So think of it from the driver's point of view. So you can follow across 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91. So these are, again, just a really fun way to utilize these in your classroom to tap into that self-actualization. So take a screenshot of this right here. We, on our website, have so many free resources for you. And one of these is we have a whole PDF that you can download, these problems of unusual thinking. And we have for different years that you can utilize if that's something that's kind of a fun way to tap into self-actualization. And then finally, the top of the pyramid, that connection to something greater than ourselves. So this is where we really start to think about inspiration. And I love the idea of how we define inspiration. In the book, here's how we define inspiration. Ooh, I love that. When we see in the world evidence that one of our ideals could be true. And there's lots of ways we can pull inspiration into the classroom. And I bet you're already doing a lot of these. So we can use movies or movie clips, stories, quotes. Oh my goodness. There's powerful research on quotations. If you use quotes or have quotes posted in your room or virtually, that's powerful. They have an impact on students. If you don't even have to have a conversation about them, just having them available can be powerful. And of course, books. So again, here's what I'd love for us to do. Right now in the chat box, start putting what are your favorite inspirational movies or books or quotes, anything that you can utilize to tap in to that top level of the pyramid. Let's share a few ideas over there. these are good. Yes, yes, yes. I'll keep them coming over there for sure. And here's the deal. I remind you of just a gentle reminder that it's important for students, the inspiration, and also for ourselves. Yes, like I'm reading these and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, tonight is the night to turn off the news and let's watch Coach Carter or The Blind Side. Yes. So powerful and really important to remember in this challenging time that we're in. So that's a whole lot of information in a really short amount of time. You guys, I thank you so much. Thank you for dealing with the computer glitches as always here. And I would love, love, love to pause and spend just a couple minutes if anyone has any questions. I'd love to spend a little time answering any questions that you might have.
So there are a couple of questions that have been sent to me directly.
Perfect.
And I'll just jump in now if that's okay while we wait for some other questions there, Tina. So where would we be able to find some additional information on this particular topic?
Yes, absolutely. So we have an actual book on this that always kind of gets missed sometimes. So we have the actual book of the same title available for this. And again, that website that I showed, if you go to Marzano Resources, there's tons of free information there that you can, I just love to share that with educators because there's so much there that sometimes we don't realize that if you go to Marzano Resources and free resources, I think is what it is. You'll remember because free is in it. And it pulls up all of the books. And again, if you look for this title, there's a ton of free resources that you can utilize there. And again, a gazillion more strategies available than what we had time for, but there's so much information to be had there. Yes.
And just this other question that's come through, how do we help our colleagues understand the importance of this?
Yes, this is a question that I get a lot. It's hard because it's kind of like I said at the beginning, there's sometimes that kind of push-pull between folks sometimes feeling like, I don't have time for this kind of what feels a little bit fluffy because there's so much content. And I think the approach is always in the reminder, just gentle reminder that we can't get to the content unless we have these foundational pieces in place. And I think just opening up a dialogue around that, I think utilizing the pyramid is so helpful. Even what I've seen oftentimes teams of teachers will do is have the slide that I showed that had the questions, just have that available when you're having conversations about students and trying to figure out what next steps are to go back and say, okay, so let's think about, I wonder what level here, where is this student getting stuck? What question are they probably getting tripped up on? So then we can go back and provide support. That idea that we can't think about math if we're hungry. We can't think about math if we are sitting in a classroom where we don't feel safe. So really that reminder that we absolutely, without a doubt, need both, that we cannot function just the content alone, and we can't just have the relationships and the social emotional side without also having the content, but that marriage of both. And I think utilizing that framework of Maslow's hierarchy is oftentimes a really nice entry point because people tend to recognize those levels for themselves, and it makes perfect sense to think through those levels for our students as well.
Great. Thank you, Tina. If no one else has got any questions, which is okay, if you do think of any questions after this webinar, feel free to reach out to myself directly. I think you've all got my email address anyway. Otherwise, email through to info@hbe.com.au. And also head to hbe.com.au if you'd like to purchase the resource as well from us. Otherwise, I'd like to thank you all very much for your time. This recording will be sent out. Give us about 2 weeks, just with all this other backlog stuff we've got happening at the moment as well. But again, thank you so much, Tina, for your time. We really do appreciate it. Stay safe, take care, everybody, and we'll see you all soon.